Tehran, May 2009, and all eyes were on Iran as it prepared for its presidential elections. For under the presidency of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, its anti-Western rhetoric had hardened, while the international community was further antagonized by his determination to develop nuclear technology.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
Within Iran, Ahmadinejad's stance won support. A religious conservative with humble origins, he appealed to many of the urban working class and rural poor. But some among the middle class were angered by his failure to revive the economy and to remove Iran from its long international isolation. They threw their support behind the former Prime Minister, Mir-Hussein Mousavi, who'd reappeared on the political scene after a 20-year absence. Those 2 decades had witnessed major social change in Iran, and it seemed that Mr. Mousavi too had undergone a political transformation.
He's a man of capability to change himself.
He has been there, he has seen what has happened, and he has matured.
The Mousavi we are seeing today is quite different from that Mousavi. And also the whole world politics context has changed. Socialism is no longer there. Radicalism in world politics has gone. And most people who were under Ayatollah Khomeini radicals are now reformists.
In stark contrast to his hardline past, Mousavi promised a loosening of social strictures and greater freedom in the artistic and media arenas, although he didn't elaborate on how such freedoms would sit within the framework of the Islamic State. On the eve of the elections, he spoke to Al Jazeera.
We must inculcate the idea that there is no big brother, and interfering in affairs is a very bad thing. Speaking as an executive, we need to set things right, and different organizations will need to be involved.
His social approach has changed drastically. You couldn't see Mousavi holding his wife's hand publicly 20 years ago.
His tone towards the West was also noticeably tempered when compared to his premiership.
And the US change of tone has been good and positive and instructive and paves the ground for more talks.
But on the streets it seemed there were many drawn to him, not for policy reasons, but because he was the main challenger to the polarizing figure of President Ahmadinejad.
Mr. Mousavi came, he became the spokesperson of this campaign, and now he's become the figure and the symbolic figure for this change that took the movement for change.
Yet Mousavi's policies were far from radical. In fact, just like Ahmadinejad, he made clear his commitment to the nuclear program and uncompromising opposition to Israel. Rather than reform the governing system of the Islamic Republic, he invoked the spirit of the early days of the revolution.
I feel that this is a little similar to the first days after the victory of the revolution. What has happened is that people are not satisfied with the current policies and aren't changing the country. I think the time is ripe, and the country is ready to revise and revive itself.
Mousavi managed an astute campaign, choosing a color which no conservative critic could question.
Green is the color of Islam, and of course, look at his slogans. Their slogans were also religious. Lots of people were saying, Hussein, Ya Mir-Hussein, and Hussein is the third Imam of Shiite.
By using text messages and social networking websites, Mousavi deliberately targeted the young, 70% of Iran's population. He was accompanied on the campaign trail by his wife, Zahra Ranavad, an accomplished university professor, this giving support to his promise to improve the social position of women.
He was able to bring his wife, and that was a very astute move because of the electorate, the votes that he would be able to get at a time when women have become very politicized in Iran for their rights.
And it was Mousavi's wife who came under the spotlight during a US-style televised debate between the two chief candidates, which, to the surprise of many, had been sanctioned by the supreme leader. Ahmadinejad questioned Ranavard's credentials.
Here you know the lady.
And insults were traded on both sides.
She studied 2 master's degrees, one in Azad University. She got PhD without attending the university entrance exam. And then she's now an assistant professor without having qualification. She's now heading the faculty. This is lawlessness. This is what I'm opposed to.
I realise that you are endangering the country. In other problems, I will discuss the economic issues and how you are just managing the country. Dissolving the Money Council has put all of the banks under your personal control. It's the same as under the monarchy.
The election process had electrified the entire nation. And on polling day, a huge turnout meant that voting hours were extended in some areas.
It's impossible to say which candidate these extra voters have come to back. But one thing is clear. For all those people who say a vote in Iran is worth nothing, there are many hundreds of people who think that they are making a difference.
But despite the absence of exit polls, to the outside world, it was often suggested that Mousavi was the favorite.
And now to Iran, where the political fate of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is literally hanging in the balance today.
Friday's poll has been enlivened by a real challenge from Mir-Hussein Mousavi.
Zahra Rahnavard, a woman some call Iran's Michelle Obama.
It's only true to say that quite a lot of views that were pronounced were from outside Iran rather than inside. Naturally, if you are broadcasting from Iran, you're looking for people who speak English, who are articulate, who can express themselves, and poor people or uneducated people in the countryside haven't got the same privileges really to reflect themselves. The views of the majority didn't come up the way it should have done. I suppose many people were surprised by the result for that.
Mousavi did initially claim victory, but a few hours later, on June the 13th, the Interior Ministry announced that Ahmadinejad had prevailed by a margin of almost 2-1. Mousavi refused to accept the result, alleging that widespread vote rigging had taken place. And his supporters took to the streets in mass demonstrations, as did Ahmadinejad's supporters. Mousavi refused to back down, but rather than take to the streets, he took to the internet, urging his supporters to protest en masse.
I have been surprised that he has stood his ground and been so firm as not to cave in.
Cyberspace became a rallying ground for Mousavi and his protesters, with talk of a Twitter revolution. But while Mousavi vanished from view, his nemesis made a dramatic appearance and demonstrated that all of the new technology in the world was no match for the state apparatus of the Islamic Republic. At Friday prayers on June the 19th, a week after the elections, the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who hadn't hesitated to endorse Ahmadinejad's victory, warned that the protests must stop. Mousavi has made no further public appearances, and although his website has continued to urge peaceful protests, some have become violent, resulting in many deaths and hundreds of arrests. Indeed, the revolutionary symbols harnessed during Mousavi's campaign have been appropriated further. The chant from the revolution itself, Allahu Akbar, being adopted by his supporters. But this has been no second Iranian revolution, for following the supreme leader's warning, the protests were unmercifully put down, and media reporting of the unrest curtailed. If resentment still simmers, it does so behind closed doors.
This has not ended. People going back to their homes does not mean that it has ended. It means that the battlefront has changed and has shifted to another area. And that is within the establishment right now. and in the religious circles.
When the supreme leader stood alongside Ahmadinejad at Friday prayers to condemn the protests, one figure was conspicuously absent. Akbar Rafsanjani, former president and one of Iran's richest and most powerful clerics. Not only did Rafsanjani support Mousavi's failed election bid, but he also heads Iran's Expediency Council, a body which, in theory at least, can remove the supreme leader.
Mr. Rafsanjani's idea, since 4 years ago when he ran in the elections against Mr. Ahmadinejad, was to transform the office of the supreme leader to that of a council, rather than one person holding the position, for a council to have this position, a council made up of grand ayatollahs, with Mr. Rafsanjani being the power behind the council.
Rafsanjani has moved carefully in the days since the election, discouraging unrest, but maintaining that the claims of electoral fraud must be investigated. In an atmosphere of rumour and behind-the-scenes intrigue, how he plays his hand remains crucial.
This election and what has happened on the streets in Tehran and elsewhere since the results were announced is to an extent a sideshow. The real battle is taking place behind closed doors between Mr. Rafsanjani and Mr. Khamenei.
And it is the result of this battle between Iran's clerical hierarchy that will decide the fate of both Mousavi and the masses.